This is Leadership Development Series. Today's guest is Todd Gagney, ex-SVP SAP Concur, and now President of Dakota Shine Consulting.
Anurag,
God.
well, look at you, man. There's no big beard. I almost don't recognize you. Almost. Like when you have a passion about what you're doing and everybody sees it, like usually the dollars aren't the issue. It's a lot of these artificial constraints about how society wants you to do something that I've just said, screw it. I'm just going to follow my north arrow and let it play out the way it does. And if it works, if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Todd, good to see you always. Why don't we start by you sharing a bit about your journey, giving a small introduction to everyone.
Anurag, it's good to see you, man. It's been a number of years, so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. As Anurag mentioned, my name's Todd Gagney. I basically maybe had 3 acts to my professional career. Early on, I did 3 different startups that I was a co-founder in. They went from really bad, where we lost everybody's money, to the second one we sold, but probably made a little bit better than minimum wage. And then the last one we did okay. It was a little bit of it was banking software for the agricultural lending business. And so really small, esoteric little niche. I learned a lot, and that was enough experience to get me out to the West Coast. I joined Concur Technologies in 1997, late 97. And I spent the bulk of my career there. I think I stepped on a rocket ship with Concur. We went from $10 million in revenue when I started with them, and I left, they were $1.77 billion. I got in the good graces of Raj Singh, who I have a tremendous amount of respect as just a leader and somebody who really helped shape my career. Every 2 to 4 years, senior leadership moved me around. So I really diversified my skill set, moving from engineering to product strategy to managing legacy product lines to sales and marketing, more demand gen type of marketing, and spent the last 3 years working for the president of the company running global products. You don't get that opportunity very often. And we've gotten bought by SAP in 2014. So I spent a couple years kind of post that acquisition doing it. And then the last 3 years, since I quit Concur, I've been really working with regional B2B software companies. When I first started, there was maybe 2 or 3 in the whole region that I really focused on. Now we probably have a portfolio of 15 or 16 that are starting to come together. And so a lot of what I end up doing is some consulting, some mentoring, some cheerleading, and some of them I invest in. But a lot of it is just trying to be entrepreneurial's advocate. Like, how do we build kind of an ecosystem around software? It's been interesting to take a lot of the corporate experiences and the entrepreneurial pieces of it and then bring it down into companies that are 50 to 100 employees and say, how do you, continue to grow, and how do you develop talent? How do you find money if you need it? And so it's just a different set of problems. I've been really fortunate in my life to live in the Black Hills of South Dakota and be able to raise a family here. And I feel we have the opportunity to do that for others. And so that's been a lot of what our focus has been here.
Thank you, Todd. One of the things that made me reach out to you, you know how to work from remote more than any executive I have met. And that has certainly become the new norm. Maybe we can talk about that a little.
Yeah, it's been unique. I think it was a little early in the trend. I'm really fortunate that it's worked. I do think there are a bunch of tools that work better for remote. I do feel like there's a set of tools that you have. And I think one of the things that I think is important, at least in our culture today, people get paid for execution, right? At the end of the day, if you deliver on what you say and you agree to a deliverable and you figure out a way to do it, you generally get the next opportunity. What I find is interesting, Anurag, is do you do it with the people around you wanting to do it, or do you do it because you whip them into shape and they get the results, but you're not an inspiring leader. And I think that was the difference for me, was trying to say, I'd always been decent at execution, but I think once I went remote, I had to figure out how to be a better manager and basically realize that there's a bunch of people out there and I can't just walk around and basically influence. And so I think it really did drive a different perspective for me about how to execute remotely. And a lot of it's basic block and tackle. Do you have good goals? Can you measure them? Are there a few of them that are the most important? How many times have you seen in our organizations where we have a top 10 number one priorities? That doesn't really, you have one number one priority. And really focusing in on those things that are the most important and then putting focus around it. When I left Seattle, which was about 2004, I was a group program manager in development. And the way that I managed, I would say I was a C plus manager at that point in time. I was always trying to be the smartest guy in the room. I was trying to deliver good news myself. Somebody else could deliver bad news. A lot of bad behaviors that I think we see in young managers early on. And really just want to be on top of every little detail. So then I move, and you have all this talent that's now spread out across the globe. I had people in India, I had people in Seattle, and I'm in South Dakota. And so all of a sudden you have all those tools that you tried to use about delivering messages, stopping in people's offices. You lost all that. You're out of sight, out of mind. And so to me, I had to start rethinking about how do I manage and how do I make a relationship with my direct reports value add instead of a manager relationship. And so that was the light bulb moment. It was like, what do they do? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do I give them more rope in the areas that they do very well? And then how do I back them up and make sure that they're aware of some of their weaknesses and blind spots and help them manage that? And what you end up doing is they deliver the good news, you deliver the bad news. All of a sudden there's loyalty, you're adding value to them, and you're giving them an option to grow professionally in their environment. That was the key thing. And it was totally out of a self-serving need to stay in South Dakota and draw a paycheck, right? I had to figure it out. And then all of a sudden, then it was like, how do you just get better at doing that? How do you go from 8 people to 100 people to 400 people? And how do you scale that in an organization? But it was the same kind of core understanding and motivation, right? What motivates you to come to work every day?
Sounds like a lot of work.
It's messy, maybe not a lot of work, but I think it's messy. Once I saw it working and you see and you can exploit the talents that these people have and let them grow in the directions that they want, it was massively fulfilling. To see people that were individual contributors that ended up being, senior vice presidents in your organization. And then they left your team and went somewhere else. It made my life so much easier to navigate Concur because you had all these relationships with these people. And so it was one of these things that paid dividends over and over again for me and was really the key to my success in my career. And so over time in those 19 years, I had kind of a reputation of doing this. And so talent came to me towards the end of my career. I think a lot of this is you got to let them grow and maybe take on more than you. Maybe they're more capable than I am. And that's okay. I think a lot of leaders want to hold talent in their teams because selfishly, that's how they are successful. You have to do what's right for them. If you are a talent magnet because you have a reputation and a brand, then all of a sudden things get a lot easier. And so early on, you had to go through a lot of resumes and a lot of things. Personally, there was a lot of just growth for me in that. Most of the jobs that they gave me, I wasn't qualified to do it all, Anurag. Really, to go from engineering to a sales role to demand gen marketing to do an M&A, I didn't have those skills. What I did have was I was pretty good at people. I was pretty good with process. I was pretty good with metrics, and then I would learn the domain expertise along the way. And you basically had a model. And I think what I was best when I was in that growth mentality, when I was learning something, I was being challenged, I was trying to figure out a different set of problems. I'm more of an 80-20 rule guy, right? I think I'm good to get it from 0. If it's really messed up, get it to 80-85%. Doing the last 10 to 15, 20% is really probably not my specialty, but I knew that. And I had to be honest about who I am. And so that's probably why I was looking for small disasters in Concur. Give me something that's messed up and then I'll go fix it for you. And you build a brand and a reputation on taking things and building them. And when you're in a growing business, there's a ton of problems, right? Like every company or every division that you're in has scale problems. And so figuring that stuff out was really important and critical to our growth of our business. I think that people say when things don't go well, I was unlucky. And when things go, it was all me. That's not the case. I think there's a lot of people that mentored me. I do think that mentorship people that took the time to give me some feedback certainly helped. To get to your ultimate question, I think that more people than not are interested in helping. I think that it's a little bit of an ego boost, right? Somebody comes to you and says, I admire your career. I think that the part that I struggle sometimes is people just want to know the keys to the, like, how do you do it? There's some magic formula, and I'm just going to whip it out and say, it's just do this. So I think that you have, if you're interested in mentorship opportunities, you have the responsibility to drive some of that conversation. Ask leading questions about their career, ask questions about what you want and what you need. And then I think the other part of this too is time is valuable. And I think the ability to say, I'm going to go do something. This is what I took out of this conversation. And before I meet with you again, I'm going to do something with it. So the action component of that, I think, is really important, where I'm more vested and more interested in meeting with you again if you took something out of our conversation and you applied it and then you had some feedback for me. If you just said, that was interesting and I want to go to coffee again, okay, I can do that with a lot of people. And so I think that it's creating momentum that says, something resonated with me, I applied it to it, and it doesn't have to work. Like, it's just basically saying I did something with our engagement. So I do think that's on the individual. And so I think that you have to do that, and you have to really own some of that. On the second part of it, you were talking about a little bit about not knowing what to work on. I think this is an area that I probably haven't excelled in, and I've had to get better later in my career. As you get more and more people, I think communication just becomes like a huge opportunity, and narrowing a lot of something that's complex down to something that's simple, and then repeating it more times than you feel comfortable is really part of it. When I was working at SAP, probably 30% of my time was just evangelizing what we're doing and keeping everybody together. So you're going from office to office in different cities, and you're giving basically the same message, but it takes it to be simple and stay consistent so that people understand what you're really working on and why. And saying it 5 times may not get everybody on the same page. I was always underestimating the amount of effort it took to get everybody on the same page. And whether that was like email, whether that's like webcast, whether that's doing in person, whether it's talking about in a stand-up, it's reminding people that we have a set of priorities and a set of lenses, and this is how we define success and why we're doing it. And so I think less is more is maybe the hard lesson that I learned, and you have to be extremely consistent. For me, I got kids, and so that was a good reminder. It's the same thing with my kids. So those 2 metrics in particular, it wasn't totally surprising, and there's work to be done for all of us in that area. Even like in startups, these are companies that I'm working with today that are much smaller in scale, and even like trying to build quarterly objectives. I asked the leadership team what the 3 objectives were, and 80% of them didn't get all 3 of them. There's 60, 70 people in this company. Even on that scale, where they're working at an executive staff level, only 2 out of the 6 got all 3 of them.
Why do you think this happens?
Because we're not very disciplined in the way we talk. I think that's part of it. Is there's a lot of shiny objects in startups and a lot of complexity. I don't think we do a very good job of seeing the forest through the trees. I think this is another area, I think, Anurag, that I've tried to get better. Decision making is really important in all of these roles. I think if you look at people that are successful, they're actually pretty good at decision making. This is an area where we don't maybe invest enough in our people to, like, how do they make better decisions? And just even the quadrangle of saying, is this a decision that is not reversible and is highly consequential? I better spend some time on that, versus a lot of other ones that we talk about that make us feel good because we're spending time doing it. But at the end of the day, it probably should be delegated, and we shouldn't be really talking about it because it's inconsequential and I can reverse it if I need to. And so even just those 2 dimensions, we talk about a lot of things to make us seem busy. And in that busyness, I think we dilute our messaging and we can't stay focused from a communication standpoint, is my personal opinion. Yeah, you're trying to empower people. You're giving them a lens to say, this is how we define success. And then you know what your core values are in your company, like culturally is important. And you want them to make decisions. You don't want to have to tell people what to go do. You want them to feel empowered and that there's a range for them to do because they know the outcome. And so I think it is all tied together. And it's, as you've just described, though, it's to make it simple and work, there's some complexity to it. It's a complex question. I'll maybe use my own example. I was probably a little bit selfish. I did these startups. I went to Concur and I started to diversify my skill set with the thought of I'd like to get back to a startup. I was relatively clear with Concur saying part of the reason why I didn't do as well at my startups was I didn't have all the diversified experiences that I needed. The very first company that I didn't understand sales well enough to like make it successful, and it was a flaming failure. And it hurts me even to this day. And so a lot of what my North Arrow at Concur was, how do I diversify my skills so I can go back and do something different? As it turned out, it was a career instead of a job for me at Concur. So I think that this starts with the individual knowing what they want and being okay explaining that to somebody. I think I've had a lot of people in my career that just like they just want a job and they're not self-aware enough to know what they want. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Some of them want a career, but they don't understand what to go do. And I think those are hard. I think you can talk to them about what your strengths and weaknesses are. You can help mentor them in a direction. But I think for the ones that are serious, you got to drive this. You got to decide what you want to do and what some of the steps are. And it doesn't mean you can't change. It doesn't mean you can't be opportunistic, but you need a path. Just like we're talking about objectives for a corporation, you need them for yourself. And so the best person to be responsible for career development is yourself. I think there's assets at the company that you can leverage. There's mentors that you can go do. Unless you have a good idea and a goal of what you want to go do, that's hard. So that's one. Two, I think there are more resources today than there ever have been. It is amazing that if you want to read books, if you want to take online classes, I took a class on decision making just recently. It was like I think it was 12 weeks. It was maybe 2 hours a week, so it wasn't a heavy lift. But it was just a really good professional development component of it. And it was relatively inexpensive, $400, $500. And like finding good content that is accretive to what you're doing is everywhere now. You don't have to go back to college. There are just assets everywhere. If you want to read, there's a lot of smart people that have already documented what their journey. And if you're good at picking out some of that stuff and applying it, there's a lot of benefit to that. This all starts with the individual. What do you want to do? How do you define success? And how do you rally the resources around you, whether it's at your corporation, assets on the web, or mentors to really move your career in the direction you want? And it's okay if you want to just collect a paycheck and have a good work-life balance. That's not bad. That's a direction. Just make sure that you're putting yourself in that position and you're self-aware to know that that's what you want. It's having a game plan. Unfortunately, I see more people have an aspirational goal of what they want. I want to be a vice president, but yet they haven't done the work to lay the framework to get there. Yeah, I guess I would start with, this is generalization, but it's if that's what you want to go do, I think going and finding some of these people that are in those positions and asking them a little bit about, that's that mentor relationship. Can I take you to coffee and you can just explain to me how you got to this role, right? Like just the simple pieces of it. Tell me what a day in the life looks like. Because I think a lot of times we don't have a good understanding. We think we want the money and the title. That's all good. But do you want the stress? Do you want the time commitment? Do you want all the other pieces that go with that? And I think from there, what you start to do is saying, what skills does that individual have in their day-to-day stuff? And maybe that's what you do. Maybe you're working on that with them as a mentor to say, like, how did you get here? What are the skills that you do? And then you do a skill delta between where you are at and where that person's at and create a report card, right, for yourself. And this requires you to be pretty self-aware to say, on the execution standpoint, I'm going to give myself a grade of 1 through 5. 5 is killing it. 1 is not. I'm at a 3. What do I need to do to get to a 5? Am I good at managing people? Like this person is managing a ton of people. I manage 3 or 4 people. If I want to manage 100 people, how do I do that? How do I take some of the things that I do well and scale it? If that guy needs to see around the corner from a strategy standpoint, like how do I start to, and my job today doesn't really require me to do much strategy. Here's the project. How do I exercise that muscle and develop it? And so what I would say is you got to find those people, then you have to interview them, and then you have to create this report card and do this delta compared to where you're at today versus where they want, if that's what you want to go do. And I was much more of a business generalist, right? I didn't want to go up the line of being a professional services vice president or SVP. I wanted to be more of a generalist. I looked at skills that basically were better at just horizontally navigating the organization versus a vertical domain expertise. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just where I was interested in being. And so you kind of default to characteristics and skill sets that are more generic across the board. Does that make sense? I have a problem talking, Anurag, whether the stuff's coming out of my mouth is anything. I think this core component of investing in people is always the piece that I default to, because I think most managers don't do a great job of it. We manage the way we want to be managed ourselves. We give praise the way we want to be praised. A lot of that gets lost in the shuffle where you're managing big teams. They're all different. So how do you figure out some of those things? Yeah, it's funny. I would say that later in my career, I started to break up an hour one-on-one into Tuesday, Thursdays, and then half of it was tactical and half of it was more strategic, employee focused. To maybe put a finer wrapper on it, the more strategic and development, I tried to drive. And so I had components of coaching and career development and opportunities, and I really drove the agenda to that. The tactical one, the employee owned. And it was interesting. If you didn't provide me an outline or an agenda for the tactical one, we didn't do it. And so it was a forcing function to say, if you don't have anything to say, we're not just filling time. Sometimes we feel good about just talking and being busy versus doing something that's actually meaningful. And so it was just interesting. There's responsibility on both sides to do this. And the first couple times where you didn't provide an agenda and the meeting got canceled, that changed pretty quickly. Unless they basically wanted the time, so then they put more effort into it, which I thought was good. It was helpful.
One of the complaints I have heard from managers why they are not able to drive one-on-one's focus away from the tactical stuff to really long-term what the employer is looking for is they say that my organization doesn't offer that many options. So what can I tell the employee? What would you say to such a manager? Are their hands really tied?
I don't think so, but I think it does take work to figure some of this out on your own. There's no rocket science to this. I think a lot of it is just starting with what does an individual do? What do they not do? How self-aware are they? And can you have hard conversations with them that are non-defensive? If you can get to those, that's the building block. You can start to see opportunity. You can, even things like, I always loved when I went on vacation, you take one of your direct reports and say, you're basically covering for me. Just the experience of them stepping up into that role and seeing what they do. And it's not about moving the ball forward in your organization, but it's about managing some of the tactical stuff that comes up. Are they ready to do that? And can you groom them just for that opportunity? That's not something HR is going to tell you to go do, but you want coverage while you're gone. You don't want people calling you on vacation, but you do want to see if they can stretch into that goal a little bit. And so I think there are a lot of just easy wins like that where you can try some things and see, I'm traveling next week. Can you cover any customer escalations? There's just plenty of opportunities to do that and give people opportunity to grow and see how well they do.
Right.
I guess I can get down a little bit more specific, Anurag. I think you see all different types of people. I had an employee that just said, I want a manager to clear the roadblocks for me and let me do my job. So you're pretty happy with the career path you're on.
Right.
And you want a manager that doesn't spend a lot of time and give you a lot and basically resolves roadblocks for you. Okay. If that's really what you want to do, and you wake up 5 years from now and you say that's still what I want to do, that's fine. So you have these different personality types. I don't think everybody is, I want to be a vice president of the business. And I think part of that is meeting people where they're at. You not only meet them where they're at, then you have to say, are you self-aware to realize, do you have the skills, the inclination, and the ambition to do what you want? And then can I lead a breadcrumb trail to help you? You have to run it. You have to do the work to do this. And a lot of times you find people that have aspiration, but not the inclination or the ability to do the work. And I don't think that's wrong. It's just, it is what it is. And you, as either a coach or a manager, can't pull them through that. You have to basically meet them where they're at. And so I do think that's the challenging part. Opportunity, talent, you see all these things in them. And either you can inspire them to try to do some of this, but at the end of the day, they need to meet you somewhere. And they need to do the work to pick up the next piece of breadcrumb trail and move it forward. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And that's the job of a manager, right? It's just how do I inspire you to get the most out of what you want to do in the current situation we're in? And it's a wide range of things, right? We've talked a lot about the positive of all of this, but there's definitely people that just want to come in, do my work, be low drama. I'm happy to collect a paycheck and do it really well. And there's nothing wrong with that. But don't assume that if that's the guy you've been managing for 2 years, and then you have to keep asking the question because things change.
Would you change that answer if the person was a startup?
Yeah, so I think that if you don't have this growth mentality, if you're not willing to be uncomfortable, you should be running a startup. What worked for me last year didn't always work for me the next year. Like, you had to evolve. And I use that kind of thing that's saying 50% of what you learned in the startup, you're going to have to get rid of and then learn another 50% of it. So to continue to scale, the demands for startup executives it's so immediate. If you want to continue to grow 60, 100%, 200%, whatever it happens to be, the problems that are coming at you are hard. And so your decision making, your leadership, your mentorability, and your adaptiveness are really high. They need to be high. And if you're not coachable and self-aware, I think you just have a harder road. I really do. And I'll be super honest with you. There are people that have wanted to work with me that they think they got it figured out. And I'm like, cool. If you got it figured out, you don't need me. You've got it figured out. But I don't want to work with people that I don't feel like are coachable or have an arrogant attitude that I've gotten this far, and so I walk on water. And it's like, okay, then great. Good luck to you. I hope it continues. Because I think you're going to need people around you. I think it is, to your point, maybe even more important the smaller the organization.
One of the things I've heard from people in similar roles is, where is the time?
I usually do try to do a assessment of their calendar. Let's take a look at a time inventory piece. Essentially, what you start with is, do you agree that you want some more like meetings that are just meetings to update people where you don't really need to do it? Or there's meetings that you should delegate to people that you don't need to be in. Some of that is trust. They got to trust their people. But I think a lot of it is, what value are you adding to it? One of the questions I always ask is, what's the thing that you can only do in this company? Like that individual. And then when you get them to articulate that, you're saying, are you doing this in that meeting? Are you doing it in this meeting? And they say no. And you're like, okay, let's make sure that you're doing them in the right meetings. And then the ones that it's really no, let's really take a hard look and prune some of that to create some space. It's not even about executive coaching, Anurag. I think some of it is just thinking about your business more strategically, right? There's a fog of war, I think, in all of our jobs, where it's just, there's tactical stuff every single day. And we value the busyness of it. We don't really spend any time thinking about around the corner or your career development or these more structural things that are going to move you forward. Yeah, I think it's a complex question that I probably struggled a lot with in my life. My wife will tell you that. Work-life balance. I've enjoyed work. I think that almost everything that I've done for 25 years has been a passion. It's not been work. It's been something I've enjoyed doing. But it does have trade-offs, right? There are opportunity costs to like spending time there versus being with your family. So I do think you got to find those balances. I do think that having time outside of work where you're doing something else that you're passionate about does make you sharper at work. If you're basically working 80 hours a week and this is all you're doing, I become a dull crayon. I'm not as sharp as I will be, or I could be, without some other influences. And so whether that's health, whether that's sleeping, whether that's just good relationships with other people, to your point of, are there skills that you develop in professional life that apply to your personal? I think what I've described to you on a lot of this is better listening skills. You're just basically listening to understand what people do well. And so I do think that's one that I've gotten better with my spouse and my kids, is listening. Don't have a preconceived notion about what they want to do or who they should be. You want to meet them where they're at and help them with the challenges that they have in front of them. And so I do think there is a lot of overlap there. You want passion. You want like something that gets you up in the morning. You want to realize that we're given one life here, and it's an amazing experience, and to live it to the fullest extent. No regrets, because tomorrow is not a guarantee. And regardless if you do that in a startup or your corporate world or your work-life balance, that's fine. Just bring the heat every day, because it's not a guarantee tomorrow. And I think that's been a good reminder for me personally.
Yay!
Well, this has been good, Anurag. It's fun. These topics are timely. I hope that they resonate with people.